Dear all, I am Laura Matukaite, Media and Communication Manager at Chiaro Community. Welcome to today's CC-Webinar.Live keynote and knowledge sharing session, and thanks for joining. We would like to also thank Orange for supporting and sponsoring today's CC-Webinar.Live session. And now I would like to welcome and hand over to Cedric Gorman, Senior Marketing Manager, International Mobile Services at Orange, to introduce himself and share his presentation with all of us. For audience, if you have any questions, please do use the chat box option throughout the session and during the panel. Also, after the panel discussion, we will have some time aside where you will be able to ask your questions verbally by clicking on the raise hand button and allowing me to unmute you. So, Cedric, over to you and your presentation.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. So just let me share the screen. Thanks. So I'm Cedric Gorman. So I'm in charge of the marketing for mobile services at Orange International Carriers. So Orange International Carriers is an international provider for enablers for operators, including data, voice, and mobile services for roaming, essentially, and messaging as well. So we do manage our own submarine cable networks across the world with many POPs and some services on top of them. So I'm since 8 years in the wholesale mobile community. In charge of, previously I was in charge of the Wi-Fi business for Orange, and I'm also a member of the board directors of i3 Forum, which is an international organization about the carrier services and IPX providers. So today, the idea is to look at the features of mobile services and future of mobile wholesale and roaming enablers. So just very quickly, I have a brief overview about what's happening this year and the disruption caused by the COVID-19. So just a few information regarding the impact of the market of these roaming wholesale, and we'll see how all our carriers community impact, sharing some insight as well. So first, of course, this COVID-19 sanitary crisis impacted the travels with more than 80% going down in the travels, so with a direct impact on the roaming business. So when you look at different studies, so it could be evaluated up to 25 billion over 9 months of decreasing of revenue for operators and for the telecom industry because of this, on this part of the market. Another big impact for us is some, let's say, delay about the development and the deployment of new generation networks, especially about the 5G networks, which are the next generation mobile networks we are developing and deploying now. And there is some delay because, of course, you can understand that most of the operation were delayed and will be delayed for a few months again. But we'll see later in the presentation that maybe it's also this crisis will maybe speed up this deployment because the need of connectivity is still increasing. When you ask about this delay on 5G, so you have 16% of operators who think that there will be some delay, and you have some information here. And most of people you interview are thinking that the back to normal will be around 2021, of course, depending on the evolution of the crisis itself. So just to share a little with you the impact on the carriers like Orange. So if you look at the IPX for the mobile services, so directly impacts the mobile roaming traffic, because IPX and GRX are carrying the data traffic for roaming. You see that right after the lockdown in Europe, the traffic not collapsed, but decreased slightly to be back to lower as it was last year and a year before. We are still not recovering this traffic, but there is still remaining traffic, mainly, we believe, mainly provided by connected objects, by M2M, by permanent roamers as well, and all the cars and this kind of objects which are connected in often in roaming situation or in permanent roaming situation. The consequence is that the operators who are big decreasing of their roaming business are asking the carriers like us to be more flexible on the business model, to be able to adapt the way we are invoicing your different services, could be IPX, signaling, value-added services, to follow the market and to follow their real business. Because so far, the way the business is going was very predictable, because it was in growth, more and more roaming every year, year after year. And this time we learned that some crisis could happen. This time it's a sanitary crisis. Tomorrow it could be whatever natural impact or business crisis. We don't know, but some crisis could happen, and it asks us to adapt our business model to be more flexible. So this is one of things we learned from this crisis so far. If we look at the other businesses we manage, voice, for instance, so voice, there was a slight increase at the beginning of the crisis, at the lockdown setup, because people were talking each other pretty more. The fact that people were going to remote office, home office, so they were using more and more voice. So there was a peak at the beginning, and this peak wasn't maintaining on the long term. It was just a 15 days, 3 weeks peak at the beginning to set up everything with a lot of voice call, international voice call. On IP transit, internet, there was a huge demand to provide some capacity in emergency to be able to support this all distance working and the personal entertainment as well, because people were locked down and most of people were stuck at home and want to have a good connectivity for their personal use and for their office uses. So the international capacity faced a huge demand at the beginning of the crisis as well. So we were able to provide to our customer. And finally, regarding the SMS messaging, both P2P and A2P, there was non-significant impact, some few peaks, but nothing very remarkable on this kind of market. So what was the impact on the users and of our customers and on the end users? Definitely the home office becomes a standard, so we are all here attending this event mostly from home for most of us, because it's a normal way as long as the crisis is still with us. The effect was to stress the fixed internet access. So we forgot about the fixed internet access because it was mostly something we use for watching TV, surfing the web. But now this fixed internet access becomes mandatory. The quality of service of it and the performance of this access was really mandatory, with 2 or more people working at the same time in the same place using the same link. So it was really interesting to see how DSL and fiber access becomes mandatory. Most of people connected on Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi was also important at home. The increase of video conferencing and the increase of remote event and webinar like this one. So it's impact with a high demand on the internet bandwidth. So this is the consequence is the increase in the submarine cables and IP connectivity, as we said before. So everyone wants to keep the link by using the video, by having more interactive sessions. So it's really stressing the network as well. And regarding the corporate network, so the corporate network were lower used because people are not going to offices. The offices link were very, very reduced. but all the company had to increase the capacity of their VPN access. Because with everyone working remotely, you have to have the good size of your remote accesses and VPN accesses to your corporate networks. So lowering the usage of the corporate internal network, but increasing the VPN accesses for the home office. And of course, people locked down, it's not only workers, it's also family, and all these people are asking for personal entertainment. If you are not allowed to go outside for your home, you are watching more TV, watching more movies, and doing more gaming, whatever. So the same, it's increasing the network demand. So regarding its direct impact, so an indirect impact, on one hand, this COVID crisis so delayed the rollout for the 5G because we were not able to roll out as predicted, but the need of connectivity was never so high. And 5G becomes more urgent than it was before, because before 5G was seen like an extension of the 4G, but we believe that we have little time to do so. But regarding this crisis, what we learned that this crisis will certainly accelerate the usage and the development of 5G. So we are losing time at the beginning of this new generation of network because we are delaying the rollout, but certainly we will accelerate to be ready sooner than expected because the demand is now there. For instance, there is also the fixed wireless 5G, which is a way to provide a fiber-like connectivity for home or for offices in regions or in areas where the fiber and DSL are not economically interesting to be rolled out. And if we want to be able to provide the right quality in home or offices, even those ones who are not eligible by fiber, 5G, fixed wireless on 5G is a good alternative, and maybe this crisis will allow more development for this and a better business case. And finally, it was already the case before this crisis, but 2G, 3G decommissioning will maybe speed up and VoLTE roaming becomes mandatory because when you move to 5G, the voice must be VoLTE because there is no more CS fallback from 5G to old circuit switch. So we believe there will be an acceleration of the VoLTE roaming adoption as well. So just because we are speaking about the future, so 5G, what will bring 5G? So 5G is split in three main areas. So the first one is broadband everywhere. So basically providing the same as 4G, but with more bandwidth, more connectivity, better access and better speed to allow video services, to allow working everywhere. This slide were designed before the crisis, and we are more and more, they are more and more accurate because we know that working from everywhere is now clearly mandatory. And after you have different new use cases with 5G. So the first one on the left is the URLC, which is ultra reliable and low latency communications, which is basically how to bring very, very low latency communication, real-time communication with 5G with very low latency. For specific use cases like automotive with autonomous cars who have to talk to each other very, very short, in very, very short time, industry, remote health, remote activities where you need, you are controlling something remotely, you need to have a very, very accurate and sensitive network. So this is one of the area and new use case 5G will bring. And on the other side, there is also the massive machine-to-machine, massive IoT coming with 5G. So 5G is planning to enable the smart cities, smart agriculture, smart everything to provide connectivity at greener connectivity and better connectivity for all this kind of object with small chipset and cheap chipset. So you are certainly aware that there is two ways of deploying 5G at the beginning. So 5G comes in two flavors. The first flavor is a non-standalone 5G. So it's a 5G at the radio level, but all the core network remains a 4G network, which the main interest is that you can roll out with more quicker, and you can provide only the EMBB massive bandwidth on this, so the first use case, but it allows to have a 4G plus possibilities on your network, but you don't change your core network. So you can delay the investment. You don't have to have all the standards set up and working properly at the beginning, but you can provide a 5G user experience for smartphone, for laptop users and these end users. But you cannot address the smart cities, and you cannot address the low latency real-time traffic. It's interesting for international carriers like us because we have nothing to do, because it's for the roaming. In that case, it's still 4G core network talking to 4G core network. So it's basically 4G roaming. So there is no need to develop anything to provide and to open roaming routes in 5G non-standalone network. On the other side, we have the standalone 5G networks. We have the full 5G, both at the radio level and at the core network level. The difference is that we have to totally redesign the roaming and the interconnection, because the 5G interconnect and roaming are using new protocols, new authentication. So it's no more signaling like SS7 or LTE, but it's HTTPS signaling. It's also impacted the design of the network, because we will have to provide regional breakout points for massive IoT, for instance. There is no need to have all the traffic going back to the core network, home network for IoT, for instance. And the benefits are all the 5G capabilities will be available, and also must be available in roaming, like these low latency networks, massive IoT, slicing, all this kind of new use case bringing by 5G must be available in roaming as well. So it's a big disruption, technical disruption for us as a carriers to provide these kind of services. So as we say, 5G will bring the real takeoff of the IoT, Internet of Things, because the network will be designed by itself to support this kind of traffic. But we need some assets to be able to provide these services. So we have some pillars needed. So first, we need a very good IPX networks, providing the right SLAs, providing the right quality of services to provide these IoT, the right level of services they request. So secondly, we need data management platform, because all these connected objects all over the world must be managed properly, especially managing their connectivity. Another point is to be able to provide a connectivity, a worldwide connectivity. Most IoT could be designed and set up in a region of the world to be sent at the totally other region of the world. But the connectivity will be sometimes embedded with the object itself. You will not pay a data plan for each object you buy, but you will have an embedded connectivity with an object you pay for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. So we need to be able to provide this global connectivity worldwide, either in roaming or with local agreement to provide the local connectivity for that. And last, tracking, being able to check the traffic, to be able to check the usage of this, and to be able to provide big data and analytics around all these usage for invoicing purpose or analytics or whatever. So this is what we need to provide and to propose to our customers for a successful IoT deployment. So for carriers like us, the challenge, what are the challenges? So regarding the mobile roaming, we have to be able to Today we are able to provide a non-standalone, but we have to be able to be ready for the standalone one, which is coming. VoLTE roaming is mandatory. We have to speed up the VoLTE roaming routes and interconnection to be ready for the 5G. And of course, increase the capacity. Today, we are speaking about gigabytes for the roaming. We will need hundreds of gigabytes to interconnect and roaming. So it's just another scale in the network as well. For the IoT, actually, we are already matching the requirement with our IP networks to provide the IoT, but we will, of course, enforce them with more point of presence. So we are developing more point of presence. We need secure networks. It's really important to have secure networks for IoT. You are aware that sometimes some IoT could be hacked and control taken remotely, especially mass market IoTs like webcams or whatever. So it's important if you have critical IoT to keep them on secured and closed non-public networks like IPS. And finally, once we will have the 5G fully ready in 2023 or around, we will have to better design the network to be able to propose the slicing and to support this massive IoT, because the massive IoT is a totally new scale in number of things connected and number of use cases. And even many use cases we don't imagine yet will come up by this time. So we need to be closer, to have a better management of our network, to be more reactive, to follow the standards which are yet to be defined, because not everything is defined yet, especially for slicing in roaming. And of course, Orange is working on it and contributing to GSMA and to other standards as well, to be sure that everything will work as soon as possible. So thank you for this, for your attendance. And Laura, I leave you the floor, maybe.
Thank you so much, Cedric, for this interesting presentation. And let's just check if we have any questions from the audience. Michael has a question. Michael is asking, what is the prediction for the timing of network slicing for you and multi-carrier?
So far, there is no precise roadmap on this, because still many things to be addressed. First of all, there is multiple 5G core providers. And because we have to interconnect all of these, must be first standardized. The standardization is not yet ready regarding the interconnection and the roaming and slicing. And it must be so standardized, tested, and validated between different core providers. So we don't expect to have slicing beyond the domestic network. Or if you have your core network and you provide slicing, it could be as soon as your core provider is proposing it. But you must also market it on top of that, but maybe 23, 24. If you want to have it in roaming, you must put a standard on top and you must make the interconnection, so it will be later. So honestly, we don't see it before 2024 for slicing in roaming.
Thank you for your answer Cedric. And if anyone has any more questions for Cedric, please address him directly on the chat box and he will answer. And also just a reminder for our audience, when you're asking the questions in the chat box, select all panelists and attendees so your fellow audience members can see the questions also. So thank you so much again. And now we're gonna move into our panel. So I would like to hand over to Arun, Managing Director at Red Dawn Consulting, to moderate the discussion and welcome the panelists. Over to you, Arun.
Hello, everybody. So I presume we're all in different time zones. So let me wish you a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. It's wonderful to see so many participants on this this webinar. This is exceptionally well organized, and thank you very much, Laura and the Caro community team for such a fantastic setup. We have a really exciting panel discussion now, and this is going to be about the building blocks of wholesale. So I want to keep this as sort of quick as possible, so we have enough time for questions. So please all keep your thinking hats on and be ready to ask questions. We'll keep an eye on the messages as well. So please feel free to answer, ask questions as we go, and we'll try our best to answer them as we go. And Laura, if you could please prompt me in case I miss an important one, that would be great. So just a quick introduction to me. My name is Aaron Dahiri. I am the MD of Red Dawn Consulting, which is a consultancy business specializing in all things telecoms and media. And one of our main specialisms is wholesale, as I'm sure you all know. I know lots of people on the attendee list there, which is great. So what I'm going to do is just to make sure everyone's working on the panel, just a quick introduction to the panelists. If you could go around, Cedric, we've already had an introduction to. So if we could perhaps start with Robert, could you let us know just your name and your quick role in the industry, and move around to Paul after that.
Hi, my name is Robert Staniszewski. I'm Wholesale Department Director in Polkomtel. Polkomtel is one of 4 Polish mobile network operators. We have about 26% of market share, and we are active player on the wholesale market. I'm responsible for practically whole wholesale area in terms of interconnect, international roaming, national roaming, MVNOs, wholesale settlements, selling of telecommunication infrastructure like lease lines and wholesale data. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Paul Basser. I'm the EVP of Mobile Cloud at Digitalk. Mobile Cloud is our MVNE as a service offering, supporting both MNO sub-brands and MVNOs globally. Digitalk's been in operation for about 25 years, providing platforms to communication service providers worldwide.
Thank you. Danny?
Hi there, I'm Danny Preschool, the senior partner of a telecom specialized law firm called Preschool & Co LLP, and we're advising telecoms carriers through the mobile ecosystem, through from MNOs, MVNOs, sub-MVNOs, throughout the world, especially on the wholesale side.
Sorry. Alistair, just a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi everybody. So Alistair Elliott, I'm the CTO of Networks, so run the solutions division at Pod Group. So Pod Group are a global MVNO specializing in IoT connectivity. So we're based around the world, and we've been running about 20 years now.
Brilliant. So just as before I start sort of asking questions, now the first thing to say is that we have a really brilliant cross spectrum of skills covering the entire industry. So we have operators, we have platform providers, we have MVNO, IoT, and also legal and regulatory sort of. So we have kind of the whole ecosystem in a sense on this call. So what I'd like to do is sort of mention, first of all, that when we talk about a wholesale, we're looking at 2 dimensions. One is sort of what we need. So we're looking at which segments we're targeting. We're looking at wholesale agreements. How do we get the deal from the operators? But also, more importantly, what platform we need. So there were 3 items there. That's one dimension. The other dimension is looking at who we serve. And I wanted to mention that there are the scope of this generally are obviously MVNOs we all know and love, and then we've got sub brands, which is emerging as a very important topic. IoT is emerging in a big way, but we like to embrace OTTs, over the top, as well. But also app providers now are looking to partner with platforms and wholesale, and that's even retail companies that are not digital are moving more and more into the digital space. So we call all of that bucket of customer myons being mobile innovators on network. So we've kind of come up with this new concept of a myon, which you'll hear more about in the press soon. So what I'd like to do is start asking questions to the panelists, and I'll direct them initially to who I think is the best sort of positioned for each of these. So the first question is really, given the current situation we are all in with COVID, is I'd like to ask how is COVID impacting the way customers are engaging with technology, in particular mobile? So perhaps Paul, would you like to sort of start answering that from the point of view of what you're seeing your customers asking for, please?
Certainly, Aaron. From our perspective, I think there's been quite a significant impact on MVNOs and sub-brands who have been operating in a couple of areas, one of which is those who are either retail organisations or distributing their services through retail organisations. Clearly, with the lockdown, there's been quite a very significant impact on their ability to promote and sell their services. So those who are dependent on person-to-person retail services, they've definitely been impacted. Other service providers less so, and in fact usage, I think, as Cedric was indicating earlier, to some extent has increased in certain circumstances, such as voice messaging and data services in particular. So there's been some uptake. But the other segment that's been severely impacted by COVID is clearly the roaming market. So those who are selling services to business travellers or leisure travellers, they have again been significantly impacted by the COVID situation.
Thank you. So perhaps if I could sort of move that around to Alistair from an IoT perspective. So obviously we're looking at things like security, etc. Have you seen any kind of additional demand changes from your perspective?
Well, it's an interesting market. I mean, for us, we're a very broad spectrum in terms of verticals that we work within. I mean, certainly some sectors like retail, it's probably been our biggest downturn, simply because people aren't allowed out to shops, and shops need to survive. So, cost cutting is a key area in retail. But I mean, really for us, I think generally there hasn't been a dramatic shift in the services we provide. There's been a slight downturn in terms of new connections coming on board, but certainly we're still seeing the market develop. A lot of customers are still looking forward. So say for new opportunities, they're still coming through as we'd expect this time of year.
Thank you. So Robert, from an operator perspective, what services are you seeing being considered more or less from your customers?
Good question. In terms of Poland, practically all mobile network operators experience a very high increase of data traffic on mobile networks, also voice traffic. That was quite bizarre, but the voice traffic also rose significantly, like 30-40%. We experienced also 40% increase of A2P messaging communication because practically all companies shifted communication with customers to internet and to mobile solutions. But from the other hand, roaming traffic significantly dropped, especially visited roaming traffic, because as Cedric said, roaming outbound traffic was, let's say, I wouldn't say constant, but was present because of the permanent roaming. And we experience big change of behavior in terms of customer acquisition, because practically all physical shops, physical point of sales were closed. There was rising importance of online channels and call centers. So this mobile operators and MVNOs that were able to quickly justify to this change experience high mobile subscribers growth. And of course, there was another issue, a very big importance of self-care solutions, because customers, because all companies had to very quickly change selling and change the behavior to working from home, and customers demanded self-care solutions. So that showed us, that billing systems, rating billing is not so important like self-care solutions for customers. So
Okay,
that was very important.
Great. So, Cedric, can I just ask you to sort of summarize, just for the purposes of giving us a complete kind of picture? You already mentioned some of the impacts on COVID, but from a kind of more from a end user, end customer perspective, what are you seeing as being the main shifts? You're on mute.
We've seen that most of people were staying at home. When you are really locked down, not only not going to office, but locked down at home, most of your data communication switched to your Wi-Fi and your internet access, your private internet access. So I don't have the figures per country or whatever, but I think there was a little decrease of the data usage of the mobile for some people, but other people were using it a lot more. So globally, it's balanced. As already said, so voice was increasing at the beginning. Messaging, there was a peak at the beginning because people were setting up their home office environment. In fact, the first 2 weeks were really critical because we had 2 weeks to install everything. We had 2 weeks to install your laptop, to have a VPN access, to have a laptop if you don't have a laptop, to install, to have a place at your home to organize yourself in a complicated environment, because sometimes you also have your children making your online courses and whatever. So it was a completely changing on the way you are working and you are staying at home. Clearly what was the most important during this first 2 week phase was to be able to adapt to this new demand and this new evolution. We had to be very reactive. So because as I told you, some roaming was decreasing for operators, so they were asking us to adapt the business model, but others wanted to have a big and urgent increase of submarine capacity or IP capacity to sustain to the new demand. And the same for our colleagues in Orange Business Services, who had to increase a lot the VPN accesses for corporation to be sure that people can connect to the home office. So there was many change, and we had to adapt to a very peak of demand in a very short time. And this is what we are not used to, because usually we are in a business which is more planified. So we know that we need this capacity for the next 6 months, 9 months, 1 year.
Good. So I'd like to ask Danny the same question, but slightly different perspective, if I may. So from the point of view of some of the agreements that you've been working on, which I know we've been working on a couple together as well. So how are people thinking about the agreements from a wholesale perspective differently? And I'm thinking more about things like commitments and the minimum guarantees, etc. What's your kind of view on how we need to rethink the partnership model?
Yeah, I think the partnership model is going to be hugely important, especially when we're going down the 5G route and look at some of the services that Cedric helpfully highlighted in his excellent presentation. So, for example, you know, there are going to be a lot of parties in this chain, from the likes of Orange, you know, through, you know, MVNOs, maybe different countries, different, in-country partners. So, for example, network slicing, you know, what does the 5G really mean? And then, you know, what agreements do we have behind the SLAs and the quality of service? Because some of the services are going to rely on that 5G. And if it's not there, you know, we're going to have to look at very careful SLA negotiations and what happens if there is a failure to deliver and in the interim. So I think there's going to be a need for a very open discussion with MNOs. I think we all need everyone in the chain to succeed, and everyone's got to be very clear what the legal position is on that element. And yeah, it's going to make the legal negotiation more complicated. Also, down the line, you might have customers, you know, corporate customers, you know, providing M2M solutions. They may be contracting directly with their, you know, their own customers. You know, for example, if you take a car rental service, if you're putting SIMs into cars, a customer renting from a major, say a Hertz, may enter into a contract with Hertz. Hertz may actually be caught as, by the definition of a communications provider in that local country. So they need to make sure that they have the regulatory clearance and licensing in place. So everyone in that chain needs to make sure that the legal and regulatory position is clear all the way down to the customer, because, you know, if anyone is caught, then it's going to affect everyone up the chain. So that's the legal and regulatory, and then make sure it's clear what the services are, and, you know, what credits and comeback there is up the chain all the way to the MNO if there is a, you know, if there is a failure. And sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'd like to do is to move the conversation on to a more commercial discussion about lifestyle services, right? So I know we've touched upon those at a sort of fairly kind of shallow level so far, because we wanted to get an overview in that. So we've discussed the fact that there's more voice traffic, the fact that there's obviously less roaming, there's more A2P traffic and services, etc., and obviously a much greater move to self-care. But what I feel is missing from that, and I'd like to ask the question, is specifically, so if we look at MVNOs and wholesale players, they are more flexible to be able to provide innovation for specific segments, right? So what I'd like to understand in terms of you know, what lifestyle service shifts have there been? So I'm going to prompt with Paul, if I may, on the elderly segment. So, for example, are there any kind of things you're seeing and clever segment ideas that are coming through the woodwork?
Yes, there have been a number of new propositions recently that are targeted towards the elderly segment. I mean, one of which is orienting services that just make devices simple to use, whether that's effectively the interface that you have to your phone is much more simple and straightforward, so you can identify individuals you want to communicate with. So if somebody's elderly, which makes them either physically sort of less able, or potentially suffering from dementia, or suffering from some other ailment, just the simplicity of the way they interact with the service is important. And the service may be provided effectively by a relative and then made available to that service. So you want to be able to allow one person to manage the service while another person is using the service. And then you may have specific, and that kind of service may be allied to others, such as home monitoring type services, so that you can basically ensure that somebody is safe in their own home. If they fall, then there is an alarm, and so on. So combining these services targeted towards the elderly is one of the areas in which there have been recent developments. In other areas, there have been services that have been targeted towards specific elements. That may be, for example, hearing, where you get services that are offered that essentially enable, sort of provide a voice service, for example, that is tailored to the hearing capability of a particular individual. And that hearing loss may be due to just general hearing loss, or maybe again due to just age, as we're all discovering as we get older. So yes, there have been some services that have been specifically targeted to kind of more health-oriented segments.
Thank you. So does anybody else have any specific examples that they'd like to share from either IoT or operator world, or Danny, in the contracts you're looking at in terms of lifestyle services? So non-voice, obviously video is a key one, but if anyone, do you have anyone want to mention any?
Yes, I would like to share with you about the Polish experience. We can see all mobile operators started offering OTT set-top boxes, allowing customers to watch content, watch video on demand. Mobile operators offer also special tariff plans when you do not need to pay for data when you are using when you are watching video, when you are listening to music like Tidal or Spotify. We also offering telemedicine. We allow customers to download special apps that allow customers to use some telemedicine to get opinion from doctor, to check your blood pressure. So this allows customers to have different contact with doctors. Also, we allow customers to subscribe to special magazines using some newsstand. For these services, we allow customers to use direct billing, to use cashless payments like credit cards, and also it is important that we also offer new services like antivirus, like parental control, like smart home solutions, because customers can use some operators as some sort of proxy to buy service from security, for example, or some smart home solutions. So this allows, opens a lot of possibilities for customers.
Thank you. And Alistair, can I ask you, from an IoT perspective, are you seeing any sort of demand for specific services such as security or anything in particular that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, like Paul was saying before, the healthcare has been, particularly of interest. I think in the timescales of COVID-19 happening quite rapidly, the use cases come to market, but we do see future demand, for some of these use cases, particularly like home monitoring from a health environment. It's particularly important. But there are use cases outside of that, not necessarily IT, but related to that. So one example that we're looking at the moment is education. So the need to be able to deliver on classes to students because they now need to adopt to new working environments. So they can't necessarily attend school, but they want to continue having lessons. So how we can provide connectivity to ensure those pupils, particularly those that don't necessarily have internet access at home, can still take part in the school and to receive lessons from the teachers.
Okay, so in terms of I guess we heard a lot about lifestyle service from Cedric, but are there any like one or two that you think is going to really take off in a bigger way, Cedric, going forward? And the reason I'm asking this question is because we're going to move the discussion onto infrastructure and how it might impact the backhaul, etc. Do you have any ideas about what you think is going to really impact the network usage, etc.? You're on mute. No.
You mean about the 5G?
I'm talking about the question we're asking is about lifestyle services and which ones, if you were to pick, say, one or two big lifestyle services that are going to really change the way operators need to think about how they provide services in a retail and wholesale department. Could you just sort of call out what you think are the really big lifestyle services?
Something which is big we see since a few months and years is about the gaming. Gaming
right.
More and more because people are more and more 4K gaming console, playing with this and using a lot of bandwidth because it's online gaming and things like that. So gaming at home is really a huge consumer of bandwidth. And later, I think when we will have the, all these real-time network usage like telemedicine, connected cars, whatever, it's maybe not a question of huge bandwidth, but of different design of networks to be able to provide this real-time communication more and more. And especially 5G will help because it will be able to do some slicing to manage different type of traffic, because today everything is the same pipe, and you can have some issues for having a nice video call if someone is streaming something or gaming around. So quality of service on networks will be the main thing. But gaming is definitely a game changer.
Okay, thank you. So I think what I'd like to do is kind of move the question on. So just to summarize what we've said so far and tying back to what I was saying about the different elements of the wholesale environment. So we've discussed segments and we've discussed the services that we think that's emerging. What I'd like to do next is look at the implication of that on the infrastructure and wholesale environment. And what I'd like to do is to think about that from the perspective of the Gs, yeah? So which services are more relevant for 4G, for 5G, and now we're having on the chat some questions about 6G, okay? In Korea, for example. So we mentioned that there's delays in rollouts now with the COVID, and that's going to have an impact on the ability to deliver. But Danny, if I could ask you to start with this one, because we didn't get to answer the last question. In terms of your perspective of the prominence, emergence of 4G, 5G, and 6G, how do you see that sort of panning out, and the prominence of those in different regions?
Yeah, very interesting, and all subject to negotiation. Up the chain to the MNOs. I think the MNOs will be reliant to an extent on MVNOs and sub-MVNOs down the chain to take the usage cases direct to the customers, which, as I mentioned, is going to involve a whole web of contracts and regulatory approval, and just to have clarity in terms of what the services are going to be and where they're going to be available, because one of the keys is expect 5G is going to be rolled out patchily in places. I mean, we're talking about and Cedric mentioned there are different types of 5G. Is it 5G with a 4G backbone? Was it pure 5G? And how do we deal with it on roaming? So yeah, I think it's going to be quite tricky negotiating at the moment with the MNOs, because I think the MNOs themselves probably haven't got clear visibility in terms of what the cost is going to be to roll it out. So there's going to be a lot, I think there's going to have to be some form of flexibility and partnership modeling and, real openness from the MNOs in terms of the costings going forward. One just side point to make mention on the regulatory aspect and comes through to the services. Robert was mentioning, it seems that in Poland, services where there's no data charges seem to be quite popular and successful. And, Robert, Cedric, you mentioned gaming, and that brings me on to net neutrality regulation. If an MNO or via an MVNO is going to provide a service offering that, say, users of, Prime Video or Netflix are not going to be charged for their data consumption. Certainly in the European Union, there is something called the net neutrality regulation. So you do need to structure it carefully to make sure you comply with the net neutrality regulation, which, in broad terms says you've got to treat all internet traffic equally, which is then slightly problematic given the innovative services. We're talking about network slices, perhaps treating different traffic differently depending on what, MVNOs or the customers have paid for. So, we have the commercial discussions around delivering those network sliced offerings, which will switch between 4G, 5G, maybe even 6G. And then you have to make sure it complies with the net neutrality regulation, which is this nice principle where all traffic has to be treated equally, and something that I think the MNOs should be lobbying Brussels to get some further concessions from, because I think we will need concessions from the net neutrality regulations to be able to better implement some very exciting and innovative services, which, technically will be possible down the line.
Yeah, so I think that the next sort of well, in terms of the impact on or let's say the demand matching the supply. So I wondered if either, well, I mean, this is more for Cedric really, in terms of the operator perspective, and maybe Robert as well. How are you coping with the different levels of demand between 4, 5, and 6G, and sort of maybe 6G is a bit too far out there, but how are you sort of coping? Well, first of all, are you seeing different levels of demand, and how are you coping with that that demand in terms of providing a supply to meet that demand? Are you saying that it's going to come later, or are you saying that we're going to price it differently, or how are you handling that different level of demand?
I think, as we say, in 5G compared to 4G, the main difference is that you have different use cases. It's not only more bandwidth. 5G is not only 4G++ with more bandwidth. It's this one for end users on their phone and laptop and so on, but it's also bringing all the technical ecosystem to be able to provide real-time traffic and massive IoT. Because we need to have other design of the network, other protocols, other way of interact with this new use case. Today, we have only one main use case, which is internet connectivity, and everything is treated the same level. Now we need both critical and both massive connectivity. And if we treat the same as we do today, the network will collapse. So the demand is there. It's starting to grow. The use case, for instance, for real time is not yet there, it's just starting with connected autonomous cars and things like that, but it's not yet massively deployed and the network are not ready. But the demand for the end users to get more bandwidth and more capacity is already there and will be accelerated by this crisis, because we used to have a great comfort at home with fiber, blah, 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 and now we don't want to leave it. We want to continue to have a multiple watching a movie while walking, while having a call and a video and everything in a good situation. For instance, when you will go back to your office, If you have less quality because you are sharing connectivity with all your colleagues and you cannot have this kind of video call with a good quality, you will say, oh, I was better at home. It's not normal.
So one of the questions that has come up on the chat, which also ties into your presentation, is around low power, LPWA. So low power wide area connectivity. So how do you see that sort of coexisting with cellular? And do you have any plans, either Robert or Cedric, for that? And indeed, Danny, if you have any ideas from your clients, could you give us some indication of how what the demand for low power is and how you're going to solve that demand?
I think it will depend on the device and especially of the amount of data and the amount of communication needed by the device. If you have a grid, an electric grid with smart meters who just need to remove to collect one information a day, a very small piece of data, low power are far better because it's low consumption. You can put a battery for 10 years and it's perfect. But if you have a device which must collect data every minutes, every hours, every multiple time, and which need external source of power, then 5G will be better and more accurate because you will have more capacity, more ability to manage those devices. So I think there is place for both.
Okay. Anybody want to comment on that in terms of the low power?
I think Cedric is very right. Low power demand is very critical for utilities companies like gas meters, electricity meters, water meters. So this is very important parameter, and I think for this kind of infrastructure, for this kind of sectors, mobile operators will be building narrowband IoT and Cat M1 solutions. These networks can be easily started on the present infrastructure. We can see practically we can say that narrowband IoT is like a I can say like a route for bicycles close to highway. Yes, so we can practically guarantee in the spectrum some amount of spectrum guaranteed for IoT solutions. And in my opinion, gas, electricity, water meters do not need to have much spectrum for this. So this is exactly will be offered to this kind of sectors. But 5G, we have to know that present 5G is non-standalone network model. So practically, if we talk about using 5G for IoT, we have to talk about standalone network model, which appears, in my opinion, when the business cases show up positive results for this kind of infrastructures and this kind of solutions. In my opinion, it will happen in 2-3 years, and network slicing solutions in standalone network, yes, will allow to use special dedicated models, offer special targeted groups. For example, if one customer wants to have big throughput, yes, he will get this kind of solution. If somebody wants to have special SLA, yes, we can offer this in network slicing model. So right now, non-standalone network means practically we can use narrowband and LT Cat M1. In the future, standalone for special dedicated segments.
So,
Aaron,
please.
oh, apologies. Coming back to one of the questions you asked me about in terms of my experience of negotiating the deals, and I just want to put it out there, especially to Robert and Cedric, that I've been slightly disappointed with some of the MNOs taking, I would say, sort of old-fashioned approach to minimum revenue commitments, really applying them going forwards to, as we try all in the ecosystem to move to business cases that work for 5G services. And, really, in my view, I think there's pressure on the MNOs also to prove that 5G is working. Now, they will relying on the wholesale partners, MVNOs, but if they're imposing very, very high minimum revenue commitments, I think it's going to stifle a lot of innovation and actually backfire. So, just going forwards, I think in the negotiations, it's very important that there is going to be some flexibility on those minimum revenue commitments to really allow the innovative wholesale providers bring the new solutions to the market. And that's just been personal frustration of the negotiations so far with the MNOs. And I'm just really wondering whether maybe the MNOs are going to shift their approach to maybe a bit more cooperative, because I think in 5G, they probably need the MVNO wholesale market more than maybe they needed under traditional 2G voice calls.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that, I've certainly witnessed that as well. I just think that if it's okay, we'll come back to that question about best practices in wholesale. I just wanted to move the conversation on a bit when you've got a few minutes left, and talk about the pricing aspect. We had a few questions about that in the chat there. So there are two aspects of pricing from a wholesale perspective. So one is actual minimum guarantees, as Danny has mentioned there, which impacts the amount that the operator has to pay. So if we wrap that question up with also another question, which is how can we lower or make the pricing more interesting for wholesale partners? So there's two dimensions to that. One is in the data world and the IoT world. So from the point of view of, Alistair, if you have any ideas about what you would like to see from, buying, or how you're bringing the cost down to your customers, and then also from an operator perspective. So if we start with Alistair from an IoT perspective, in terms of pricing, what strategies are you deploying to bring down the sort of overall price? What would you like to see from operators to give you in terms of wholesale rates?
It's fun, and it is quite a challenge in the market, really, for us, in that to provide a service, you obviously need to be competitive, and then you're competing against others who also then drive down the price. And it's not necessarily about a race to the bottom, but I think for us, it's working with the right operator partners to deliver the right solutions at the right price to the customer. But really, from our perspective, it just means we push that requirement back up the chain. So if we're not getting the right price from our wholesale providers, from the mobile operators, we tell them the market that the price that we need to achieve, and then get their support on the use case and the business, to win that business. So the two need to go hand in hand. And I think really from a wholesale perspective, the operators do need to be flexible in terms of their approach. They need to engage with their channel. Certainly from an IT perspective, the wholesale market is very key for them, because they can't serve every single customer and every single use case. So making sure they support the right channel to achieve the customer base and commitments that they've got is really key for us. So that's the most key thing for us. Is flexibility from the wholesale partners.
Yeah. So and just picking up on Danny's point and asking either Cedric or Robert, in terms of the pricing. So one of that is are you sort of thinking about reducing the commitments that new entrants have to make on the minimum guarantees, but also secondly, any clever ways of impacting the pricing So one of the things that we're coming across is revenue share models, whereby if operators are facilitating an MVNO or an OTT to generate revenue from value-added services or lifestyle services, which are not airtime, then there'll be a revenue share agreement in place. Are you seeing anything like that?
In fact, this is the main point is that today, if you bring this massive IoT and big numbers of connected objects to the actual networks, it collapses. They are not designed to support it because each connection has a substantial cost. So this is why the business model today are asking for minimum commitment and are not open to welcome everyone and use the network facilities for very cheap. Because if everyone is paying nothing and using the network resources, it's not sustainable. So this is why 5G is bringing a new model of massive IoT. And we hope that 5G, by bringing the technical assets able to support these massive IoTs, a huge number of connected devices without a linked and a linear effect on the costs for the operators, it will enable to new business models. But we need to have these features to be able to provide this new business model, because today the network are not able to sustain it.
Okay. So from a sort of the perspective of what needed to boost the wholesale, so I want to sort of wrap up the discussion because we're running out of time in terms of what's needed to boost the wholesale environment. So we've discussed already an acknowledgement of the lifestyle services that are needed. So in other words, having the right sort of bandwidth solutions to match those lifestyle services. So that ranges from low power to standard GSM to 5G, and we've talked about even 6G coming on board. So there's some challenges there. In terms of the other sort of things that are needed are good pricing models. So we need to make sure that minimum guarantees are not so high. We need to make sure that pricing is shared, revenue share, or in a creative way, not to make the data prices on high bandwidth so high. So the other sort of what I'd like to do is to understand from a platform perspective. So this one is more directed at Paul in terms of what do we need from a platform perspective to make sure that we can enable these things to happen. Paul, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, certainly. From a platform perspective, I think what the MVNO in particular, but even the sub-brand needs is effectively independence and flexibility. So in order to be able to utilize the network capabilities, but direct that towards a particular market segment, you've got to have your own capability to support distinct products and services, to support distinct propositions, distinct charging models, distinct models for engagement with your customers. So you have control of that environment. You have control in relation to your customer engagement. You have control in terms of the way in which you charge for and offer services. And that can operate at different levels. So just what I've described there is primarily in terms of what is usually referred to as the business support capability, but also potentially in terms of having a full network capability or having some elements of the network capability, particularly in relation to data services. So an MVNO may have its own core network, and that allows it to develop its own services on the back of that, but also puts, I mean, you were talking about wholesale pricing earlier, also puts it in a position of strength, as it were, in relation to engagement with the MNOs, such that you can take your service and migrate it much more straightforwardly if you've got your own core network. Now, clearly there's upfront investment in that capability to be able to support that. But to be honest, the way the technology is moving in terms of virtualized service capabilities, that is becoming more accessible to more service providers. So it's now more feasible to be able to set up your own core network, to be able to operate your own business support capabilities, and to integrate that into the host operators. So there will be, there are those options available to the MVNOs. And the other element because MVNOs and sub-brands to some extent exist on a value chain, at the back end of the value chain, as it were, in terms of there is the access network, there is the core network, then maybe there is the MVNO sitting on top of that, supporting a range of different, perhaps supporting a range of different resellers of distinct services. So the operations efficiency and automation of that platform is key to be able to offer a service, to operate a service profitably, essentially, to be able to have a small team who can be innovative, who can be dynamic and flexible, so you don't need an army of people in order to manage and operate that service. So as a platform provider, I mean, that's part of our remit, is to be able to support that kind of entity, an organization that may be a dozen, 2 dozen people in total, but nonetheless is still able to operate and offer a service to its customers.
Okay, brilliant. So if you're sort of looking to, let's say, create a bridge between the operator and the, let's call them, what I call myons, the innovators that sit on top of a network. So to sit on top of a network, you need a platform. So this is a general question for anyone on the panel. If you could sort of request one thing from a platform or some functionality that you think would be really important to drive innovation and drive the wholesale market, what do you think that would be?
I can say that we can see that rising importance of CRM solutions for MVNOs. As I said, tariff plans are getting simpler. Right now, practically in Poland, all mobile offers are no limit voice, no limit SMS, no limit MMS, and bundle of data. So MVNOs, mobile operators, do not need to invest in billing and writing. Practically, they need to have good CRM, good I don't know, API or some GUI to mobile network operator systems to allow self-care, and operators should concentrate on offering integrated services. More services, lower churn, more ARPU. So this we can see in Poland that MVNOs become service providers. They do not want to invest in billing platforms, IN platforms. They want to use maximum what a mobile operator offers. So mobile operators that can understand this requirements from MVNOs can win the market, because they can lower the cost of running the MVNOs. So this is something that is, in my opinion, very important.
Great. So I just wanted to, so just before we sort of move on to just last questions, I think that there are some specifics that we're witnessing. So things like direct carrier billing, we find is very important, which was mentioned earlier. Facilitating e-commerce through things like e-wallet, sort of biometric recognition. Those sorts of things are, very important. Analytics, and also providing real-time solutions, real-time rating, analytics. We're finding is very important to create, at the end of the day, what we would call personalization. What I'd like to do is just kind of start to come to a close now. And are there any last questions on the chat that anyone wants to ask before we wrap up? I'm seeing one question that's coming up often. It's about eSIM, which we didn't mention. So I deliberately left that. So does anyone have any sort of comments on how, there's two points that I'm witnessing on the chat. One is eSIM going to be less in demand because of the less mobility because of COVID? And secondly, will it boost demand from a sort of potentially IoT perspective? Any comments on eSIM?
Yeah, it may help if I jump in on the IoT. I mean, yeah, eSIM up until now, it's still really in its infancy from certain use cases. We've certainly seen it in automotive as being the key driver originally. But yeah, what we do see looking forward is eSIM will be increasingly important in both in devices. Devices coming out will be embedding eSIMs or SIMs within the device itself. And that's actually going to drive the demand for us, certainly from a service provision, which then drives it from a wholesale perspective as well, that we do need that operator support. So it's going to have increasing importance.
Okay. So are there any more sort of questions from the attendees? I'm seeing one here about kind of CRM, which is more of a statement, which I wanted to amplify because I think it's very important, which is around settlements between different parties. In terms of now we're living in an ecosystem of media, gaming, etc. So I think we'd like to kind of there's a question there which is around automation. So I feel that a platform needs to embrace multiple parties being able to develop on that platform and be able to settle between them. So if we're going to start to include services like Spotify, Netflix, banking services, there needs to be some sort of settlement, and particularly in the retail world where we're offering e-commerce solutions. That would be a statement. So I think we're sort of running out of time now. So are there any sort of final comments? I think what I like to always do this at the end of my panels is ask very, very quickly to each of the panelists, if there's one thing that you could do to change or boost the wholesale market, what would it be? So I'm going to start, who would like to start with that, answering that question?
I can say from my perspective, I think that we have to concentrate on offering tariff plans, special solutions that will allow MVNOs, some other market entities to offer customers video content services and implement revenue share models. Because the present pricing strategy of mobile network operators, so pay to charge for the traffic, is in my opinion insufficient. This model has to be changed. And the second parameter, the second solution that should boost the wholesale revenues, in my opinion, are RCS product, because, as I said, A2P messaging is a driver of revenues in the nearest future, and RCS should replace this. We can attach chatbots and create new revenue stream.
Good, great, brilliant. Right, one quick fire solution or thing that you'd magic wand. If you had a magic wand, what would it be, Danny?
Yeah, it's a very general statement, but it's probably a nice way to wrap it up from my perspective. I just love to see more MNOs welcome. Sorry about the noise. MVNOs as their friends to make 5G work. Really welcoming them in as really the solution for the MNOs to get 5G innovative products out there, be it with a revenue share model that Robert mentioned. But I think there's got to be a mindset there from more MNOs to welcome the MVNOs.
Thank you. Paul, anything from you? Last comment?
Yeah, no, I think, well, and you would expect me to say this maybe, but I think one way in which the MNOs can make it a wholesale model more attractive is to simplify onboarding of MVNOs.
Okay, onboarding.
And play for what is in that.
Okay, brilliant. Alistair, last comment from you.
Well, no, I was really agreeing with Danny. I think in terms of commercial models and openness for operators to engage, I think that's the key.
Okay.
Yeah, joint success.
Cedric, finally, last magic wand. If you had a magic wand, what's the one thing you would like to see change?
I think it's regarding the IoT ecosystem, a change of territories, because today we are mainly doing wholesale between operators and VNO and VNEs. But tomorrow you will have new players who are not in the telco space today, but will need connectivity at a massive worldwide needs. And maybe there is new relationship to set up between carriers, wholesale providers, and new players who will need this connectivity more directly than going through, or maybe through an aggregators model on the IoT to be reinvented.
All right, so I'd like to sort of summarize by saying that, from my perspective, what I would like to see is the industry viewing the service providers. So basically, the MNO brands, the sub brands, the MVNOs, the IoT players, the OTTs, the app providers, and the retail players as one body, and thinking of them as the route to market and providing a range of services, wholesale services via platforms, as a kind of a new single body, which will help us to kind of really open up a whole new set of services for everybody and really boost the market in terms of lifestyle services beyond just pure voice. So that's kind of my summary of the whole thing. Laura, I think we've run out of time. So I'd like to sort of thank the panelists very much for a fantastic in-depth discussion. I've never done one as sort of on a PC before, so it was my first attempt. But I think, Laura, you've done a great job in helping us navigate through this, and I think it went very well. Very good attendees. So thank you all very, very much for your time. If you have any questions, you can email any of us, I'm sure. You have our details, easy to find. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Arun. Dear all, we are at the end of this webinar session, and I would like to thank Cedric for an interesting presentation, Arun for moderating, and the panelists for joining and sharing the valuable knowledge. Also, thank you to our audience for participating and listening. We are looking forward to welcoming you at our next webinar sessions planned on 23rd of June and 2nd of July, and in our future webinars. Please visit our CC event portal for more information. This panel will be soon available in our CC Media portal in Webinar.Live page in recording format for you to watch it. If you're interested to support and sponsor our future webinars, please contact CC team, and I wish you all a good health and stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.